Boom, we're in. Good morning, interweb. I'm Chris Grimes. This is Murray Cowell. I've just got to press a couple of buttons in the background to hopefully get the Instagram bit to go live as well. And rather helpfully, I've got to hover over a button and click live a few times. Now it's doing it. Bob's your uncle. Fanny's quite literally your aunt. So I think we're in. So that ironically gives us a false start. So now, this is partly for my podcast editor, Dan, you legend. I'm going to go live properly now in 3, 2, 1. Boom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an auspicious day in the Good Listening to Show Stories of Distinction and Clearing. Stories of Distinction and Genius. Do you know what? I'm going to start again. I saw your happy smile and I then thought, oh, and then I got lost. Anyway, that doesn't normally happen. So welcome aboard. The quirks of old people, me, and technology. Here we go, going live in 3, 2, 1. Boom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a glorious and auspicious occasion here in the Good Listening to Show and Podcast. This is Stories of Distinction and Genius, and I'm delighted today to be doing a special brand, strand, and founder story episode with none other than Murray Cowell, otherwise known as the grizzled veteran of the training world. He is the founder of Accelerando. I think you'll find I've said it better the second time, which made me think of that magical island of Fernando, which used to be in that program, but I can't remember what it was called now. But yes, welcome, Murray, to the show. You're lovely. It's lovely to see you and lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Chris.
Wonderful.
And it's a great pleasure to be here too.
And what would you say is your SOD, which is your story of the day, please?
Well, my story of the day is how busy the start of the year has been for me as we sit here in the middle of January, because I started running the program that I run to help trainers to grow and scale their businesses at the beginning of 2024. And so, at the beginning of 2023, I should say, 2 years ago. So December 2023, I was, because my background is in training, I'm used to December and January being quiet times.
Yeah.
So I was expecting December 23 to be quiet, and it never occurred to me that now that I'm providing a service to trainers, I'm going to be busiest when they are least busy. And so it took me a little bit by surprise, and I wasn't quite prepared for the onslaught of interest. And so this year I was, and I had things much better set up. And that means that I've spent really the first couple of weeks of this year just in back-to-back calls and meetings. So it's been a very busy, but very exciting time.
Yes. And if I may just position you further by blowing a bit of oxygenated happy smoke at you, I want you to unpack grizzled veteran in a minute, because it's a very clever sort of operator series of words as to what it is you're doing. So you're a veteran trainer with 25 plus years of experience, specializing in helping trainers and training companies to scale and grow their businesses. And this is great, this happy smoke. You're known for blending deep experience with genuine care for others' success. You have helped countless trainers escape the feast and famine cycle to build sustainable premium rate practices. And your gift, thank you, is in spotting potential in people and their businesses that they often can't see for themselves. And then what I really enjoyed about what you sent me, when you're not weaving that particular magic, you're often found cooking up a feast in your kitchen. And then this is the lovely bit, making music badly with great enthusiasm.
Yes, more enthusiasm than talent.
Lovely. But your cooking's better than your music by the sound of it.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, that's enthusiasm. And I don't know if it's talent, because it wasn't innate. There was a time when I couldn't cook, but I've kind of learned how to do it over the years. Yes.
And can I ask you what your signature dish is, please?
My signature dish comes from Madhur Jaffrey's book, which I can't remember what it's called. And there is a recipe in there called Hyderabadi lamb, where you take a whole leg of lamb and you pot roast it on top of it. You put it in a vessel and slow cook it. And before you do that, you put papaya on it, which is a meat tenderizer. And so by the time you finish cooking it, the meat just sort of falls off the bone. It's absolutely delicious.
Wow. Nom, 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 if I may say so. Sounds quite Moroccan in its flavour. Is that right? Or have I made up the wrong country?
Yeah, it's not a super hot curry, but it is very spicy and flavoursome.
Wow.
Yeah.
So one of the things you can do post this episode is share the episode,
the recipe.
share the recipe on LinkedIn, which is great. So just going back a step, just unpacked, Murray Cowell, grizzled veteran of the training world, grizzly bear, it's making me think of. So you're a bear of a man, but just unpack grizzled veteran for us.
Well, one of my clients actually looked up the word grizzled and revealed that it actually means grey haired. And as you can see, I don't actually have a lot of hair at all, but the sort of stubble that grows on the sides has turned grey. So it's an accurate description. And the reason I refer to myself as a grizzled veteran of the training world is that I've been knocking about the training world, as you mentioned in the introduction, for 27 years it is now that I've been running a training business. And my first job in L&D was actually even earlier than that, in 1990. Yes. So I know the industry as an L&D professional, as an associate trainer working at other people's training businesses, as part of the senior leadership team on some larger training businesses, and also as the owner of my own training business. And now for the last few years, helping other training business owners to become more successful by finding more clients, raising their rates and reducing their working hours. And so part of it is the veteran part, and the grizzled part is that I've been around the industry for a long time. And the reason I kind of adopted that as my strapline is because I'm also very old, Chris. I'm nearly as old as you. I'm that old. And and I thought, as you get old, you're either an old fart or you're the village elder. And I'm trying to be the kind of wise guide for other trainers, because they're treading the path that I have trod before, and I can help them to avoid some of the pitfalls and booby traps along the way.
There is a third way. You could be the village elder who farts a lot, rather than either the village elder or the village old fart.
The old farting village elder, yeah. Why not combine both?
Veteran, aka Farty Pants. We won't give you that one, but that's great, lovely. And your email trail, which is how I started to tune into you. You have a really efficient email generating machine, and you started to seep under my door in a really good way. And it is very hooky content, and it's genuinely very good. And then when we properly connected, we had certain other individuals in common, but also you used to go to the Blue School, which I didn't, but I used to know the teaching department very well at the Blue School in Wells in Somerset.
That's right, yeah. So so my family moved to Somerset when I was 11.
Yes.
And so I went to Wells Blue School and continued to live in Somerset until I moved to Southampton in the late 80s, just after I got married.
Yes. So that's where you're speaking from today, then. The Knolls of Southampton is where you're speaking.
No, I have returned. My wife and I always said that when our sons were old enough and had left home and set up on their own, that we would trek back to Somerset. So that occasion came around 3 years ago. So we moved back to Somerset 3 years ago. So I now live in a little village called Colford, which is about 10 miles south of Bath, in the middle of this.
That old chestnut of when they've flown the nest, you change the locks and move somewhere else.
Well, I always used to joke that when our younger son left, I'd be following him up the path with a for sale sign, and it wasn't much later than that. So
lovely. And I obviously I expect they know exactly where you live, and they've got a bedroom they can always come back to.
Indeed, they have, yeah, and they visit regularly. We're a very close family.
Yes. So as we're already doing, this is about getting the story behind the story of you, the Grizzled Veteran and Accelerando. And this is a special brand, Strand and founder story episode where we're going to get into the who, the what, the why, and the how you do what you do. And then crucially, we're going to find out exactly where we can come and find you to then get more help from you and to book your services as well. So Murray Cowell, it's my great pleasure and privilege to be able to curate you through the storyscape of the Good Listening To show. And if you've not seen it before, where have you been? Not you, but I'm talking to the audience here. And there's going to be a clearing a tree, a lovely, juicy storytelling exercise called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There's going to be some alchemy, some gold, a couple of random squirrels, a cheeky bit of Shakespeare, a golden baton, and a cake. Hurrah! So it's all to play for. So should we get on the open road of curating you through the journey of this? And the invitation to you, Murray, is to go where you like, how you like, when you like, as deep as you like, into the following construct. At the end, there's going to be a very funky bit, which is show us your QR code, please. Where I'm going to be able to point people to exactly where we look at your QR code, if you'll pardon that particular expression.
I love getting it out.
Great. So you're smiling, you're looking lovely. We don't know what your real background is, which is quite interesting because you've got a lovely on-brand Accelerando bit of iconography there. So Murray Cowell, grizzled veteran of the training world, what is a clearing or serious happy place for you? Where do you go to get clutter-free, inspirational and able to think?
Yeah, there's two places that spring to mind. And one is walking in the countryside, because as I mentioned just now, I live in a very rural part of Somerset, and I'm very lucky to be able to walk for 2 minutes from my front door and be in open countryside. And it's not just open countryside, but it's open countryside that you can walk through for hours without arriving at another town or village. So there's lots of options for walking around here. And sometimes I go walking listening to podcasts, but on other occasions I deliberately don't take my headphones with me or my phone, and I just walk in the open, because I find that is a place where I can really free up my mind and do some really clear thinking. And the other place that springs to mind is going on holiday, because I find that when I'm on holiday, that it brings a different perspective to the rest of my life, and I can sort of look at myself and my situation a little bit more objectively. And I find that that's a great place to sort of free my mind from the day-to-day trials and tribulations of being a human, and just think a little bit more clearly. So those are my two kind of happy clearings.
So there's a lovely sort of outdoor flavour and texture to all of that. So I'm going to arrive at a tree now in your clearing to shake your tree. So we'll have to decide, do you want to be on holiday mode, or do you want to be just sort of, if in doubt, walking out mode?
I think if there's a tree involved, then it would have to be walking in the English countryside, and it would be a giant hundreds years old oak.
Oh, lovely. So that's the tree within which there are some storytelling apples. How'd you like these apples? And we're going to shake your tree now to see which apples fall out. And this is where you've been kind enough to have thought about before we started. It's 5 minutes to have thought about 4 things that have shaped you, grizzled veteran Murray Cowell, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention. And that's when the, squirrels are going to come in, borrow from the film Up, where the dog goes, oh, squirrels. That's also known as shiny object syndrome, what never fails to distract you. And then the one is a quirky or unusual fact about you we couldn't possibly know about you until you tell us. It's not a memory test. So now over to you to interpret the shaking of the canopy of your tree as you see fit.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and it's a nice thought to have an apple-bearing oak. And this being Somerset, it is the county of apples, so there's apples everywhere. And in fact, that's the first thing that I think really shaped me, was the move to Somerset, because I was born in Kingston-on-Thames, and as I mentioned earlier, I moved to Somerset when I was 11, and my memory of that is that Kingston-on-Thames is quite a nice place, but as a child I was quite bored there, and it's kind of stockbroker belt or commuter belt. I live near Richmond Park, which is happy memories of being there, again the outdoor part of it. But I was getting close to the end of primary school, and I passed my 11 plus. That's how long ago it was. I was just about to move.
You could be older than me now. You're saying that, but
I was about to move to a grammar school, and my brother had been bullied at the grammar school, so I wasn't really looking forward to it. And then my parents announced that we were making this move to Somerset, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. My earliest memory is that when we arrived, my earliest memory of Somerset is that when we arrived here, my mother said to me, there's a boy your age living next door, go and make friends with him. It was an instruction, go and make friends with the boy next door, which is another way of saying get out of my way. So I went and called for the boy next door, and he said, well, why don't you come down to the fair on Friday? And I said, well, what fair? Where is it? And he said, oh, there's a fair in the marketplace. And I was like, what, here? And he's, yeah, it comes here twice a year. We have a big fair in the marketplace. And I remember just thinking that was absolutely wonderful. And when I actually went round to call for him to go to the fair together, his dad had a big barrel of cider on the sideboard. And he said, do you want a glass of cider, young'un? To which, obviously, as an 11-year-old who'd never been offered any alcohol before, my response was, yes, oh, yes, please, Mr. Parfit. And
Parfit,
he then gave me a half a pint of cider. And I remember thinking, I think I'm going to like it around here.
Yes, what a great induction.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. And the living in coming from somewhere that's a suburb of a big city to living in this is Wells in Somerset, which is technically a city because it's got this enormous, beautiful cathedral in the middle of it. But it's more culturally, it's more like a medium-sized market town. And so that was a really big change in environment for me. And it meant that all my friends were easily in reach, whereas previously in Kingston, they'd been spread across a much wider area.
Yeah.
And so I really feel it feels like Somerset is my spiritual home. And that's why my wife is from Somerset for going back for centuries, if you follow her family tree, all the way back to Cheddar Man, I think. And so it feels very much like home coming back here. I'm also very fond of Southampton, having lived there for 35 years. But Somerset is really where I feel like my roots are.
Are you still in touch with Parfit Jr., by the way, the son of the dad that offered you the alcohol?
Oh, I haven't seen him for probably 30 odd years.
Yeah.
I know that he did very well. He was very keen tinkerer of electronics.
Yeah.
And in fact, we rigged up a sort of tannoy system from his house to my house so that we could chat with each other in the evenings, when this was in the time when your dad wouldn't let you use the phone because it was too expensive.
Yes.
So I remember he did that, and then he went on to found an alarm business and did very well out of it. So so I haven't had any contact with him since then, but I know that he did very well.
And what was his name? I know he's called Parfit, but what's his first name?
Anthony Parfit.
Anthony Parfit.
Anthony Parfit. Yeah.
Lovely. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's lovely. That's a perfect first shapeage. Next shapeage.
Well, the next one is a bit of a strange one, really, because I very much went off the rails in my teens. So I made a mess of my A levels.
Cider, wasn't it?
Sorry,
it was the cider.
Well, it may have played a role. Yes, indeed. So I didn't do as well in my A levels as I had expected to, and that meant I didn't get into the university that I wanted to go to. So I had to take a year out. I got a job as what was then called a computer programmer.
Yeah.
So I was a computer programmer for a year. Then I went to the Camborne School of Mines, and I really didn't like it there. And I really felt like I'd got out of the habit of learning. So I left there after only a few weeks. And there followed a period of kind of rapid decline that ended up with me living basically homeless, living in squats in London.
Wow.
And I did that for a couple of years. And it was the reason I think that has shaped me is because rather than kind of going to university and doing graduate level entry into some large corporation, I had to really start again. And I had to start at the bottom and work my way up like a trainee proctologist. And that meant that I was that really I can. It was a humbling experience, but what it's enabled me to do in my work life and the corporations that I then later worked in was that I had a really good understanding of what it's like at all these different levels in the organization, and
yes.
that's been very, very useful in my training business as well, being able to relate to people at C-suite level.
Yeah.
I didn't actually quite make it into the C-suite, but I was a C-suite report at IBM, so I kind of understand what the C-suite environment is like. All the way to the shop floor, so I'm equally as comfortable speaking to people who are actually delivering the service at the coalface directly to the customer as I am in the boardroom, and really I think that's as a result of my sort of poor start to my working career.
And can I just commend you for the storytelling prowess in like a trainee proctologist? I started at the bottom and worked my way up. That's fantastic. And hitting rock bottom as well, just on a more serious point, is a really good way to really work your way up. So to reboot almost.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that it's done is that it means that I'm not really afraid of failure as much as I think I might have been without that experience, because I've been very poor, and I knew that when I was very poor, I have some very happy memories of those times. So I know that you can be poor and be happy. So I think that really helps, that I don't really worry. I do worry a bit about failure and things not working out, but not very much, because I know that even if I had this kind of catastrophic collapse sort of financially, that I would still be able to pull myself back out of that, and that it wouldn't really affect how happy I feel. I think happiness is more of an internal thing than related to, I mean, circumstances can affect how happy you are, but it's more
happiness is an inside job, which I really like. And I like the humility and the simplicity in what you described about a factory default setting of innate happiness.
Yes.
Love shaping so far.
So the third thing that shaped me is my wife and my two sons. My wife and I met when we were very young. She was 18, I was 20. We moved in together after we'd been together for 6 weeks. She turned up and stopped going home, really, is what happened.
And this is post squat era, I'm assuming.
It is, yeah. This is post squat, and I was back in Somerset. So back in Somerset, we'd known each other for a few years anyway. She was a friend of my brother's at school.
Yeah.
So we'd known who each other were, and we were in the same kind of circle of friends. But very, very soon after we got together, we lived in a flat. She moved into the flat that I was living in. That was in Shepton Mallet, and we've been together ever since. It's 40 years this year.
Congratulations.
So she's been a really major influence on me during my life. Mischievous, she's very mischievous, and I'm easily led into mischief. So that's been a fun relationship from that perspective.
A perfect match. Lovely.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
And then my two sons, they've been. I'd expected. Before I was a parent, I knew that as a parent, you have to teach your things to your children. What I was less prepared for and less expecting was how much I've learned from them, and really mostly about love and humor. And they've been like a very significant part of my life, and my values and what I wanted to accomplish in life massively changed the split second that my elder son was born. It was really as soon as I saw his little face, he looked like an alien when he was born, and I just knew that what I wanted out of life really changed at that moment, and it became less about kind of climbing the corporate greasy pole to get into a senior position, and much more about how can I free up more time to spend with my wife and my two sons. So that was quite a strong factor that led to me taking the plunge and becoming self-employed as a trainer, because it's a much more flexible lifestyle. And it meant that when they were at school, I was at every coffee morning, I was at every sports day, I was at every carol service, to the extent that my elder son's teacher said to him, "What does your dad actually do for a living?" To which my son replied, "He's a diamond cutter."
Good answer. Very witty, as you said.
Yeah.
I have heard it said that true wealth is how much time to yourself you have in your life. That's the nature of true wealth.
Yes. And I can't remember who it was, but some wise philosophical type said that the true cost of something is how much life you have to give up to obtain it.
There's a big lorry just arrived, which is probably may or may not cause a bit of noise pollution, but hey, life is going on around us, which is great. These are great shapeages so far. I think that's all 4. Is that correct, or is there one?
Well, I think that's 3. So the fourth one is 27 years in the training business.
Yes.
Because working as a trainer, and I when I first started doing it, I was quite unreconstructed really as a trainer, and my understanding of how to get the best out of people in the training room has evolved massively over the years. And to do that effectively, you've really got to work on yourself first. So there's been a lot of self-reflection, a lot of self-development, and that's all about getting your own stuff out of the way. And to make sure that your own stuff is out of the way, you first have to really understand what your own stuff is and why you're like how you are, and what your good and bad points are, and to develop yourself in a way that kind of limits the impact that it can otherwise have on the work that you do in the training room. So I've developed deliberately developed and cultivated really a non-judgmental attitude, which I think is quite fundamental to the kind of work that I do. And I'm transformed beyond recognition from the angry young man that I used to be.
Lovely.
I once was.
Makes me think of the adage of in order to lead from without, you need to lead from within. And I loved how you talked about getting out of your own way.
Yeah.
Then links to that lovely quote, which it made me immediately think of, is the best resource a good facilitator can bring into the room is themselves.
That's very
in
true.
order to enable and curate the gathering that you have in front of you.
Yes, I would totally.
Great shaping, if I may say, Murray. So now we're on to 3 things that inspire you.
Well, the first thing that really inspires me is music, to the extent that the conspicuous lack of talent still hasn't put me off from attempting to play music. I started with the violin when I was very young, and I played guitar in my teens. I was in a band, which was much less common then than it is now. Everybody's in a band now. I made electronic music, used to make trance techno with a friend of mine during the 90s, and I've learned to play the saxophone. I've got various sets of keyboards, other kind of instruments knocking around. So music really inspires me, and I love listening to music. I love going to gigs.
So you can actually pick up any instrument and learn how to play it by the sound of it. Because
I was at a party once, and there was an accordion there, so I picked it up and started playing it. And somebody one of my friends at the party said, "So how long have you been playing the accordion then?" To which my reply was about 3 minutes.
So you're a bit of a musical savant, it would seem like.
Yeah, it seems to be that I can pick any instrument up and play it, but I'm not so good at becoming good at it. And I think partly it's because I don't put in the practice. And
yes, so you've not done the 20,000 hours, as they say, on one particular instrument.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I got interested in making electronic music, you don't need a high level of skill at playing musical instruments. It's a different skill. It's really a skill at operating computers.
And were you singing alongside this, so being a vocalist as well? Or
I have done some singing, yes.
Yeah.
So I was in the band that I was in as a teenager. Our greatest moment was that we played the 100 Club in London, supporting the Anti-Nowhere League.
Oh, the Anti-Nolan League, did you say?
The Anti-Nowhere League.
Anti-Nowhere. Yeah, I didn't think there was an Anti-Nolan. The Nolan sisters are league.
League, yeah.
No.
A bit extreme. And we also played Worthy Farm. There was a private party up there that we played one time. So those are the kind of sort of career highlights.
Lovely.
That was while I was still in my teens. So there hasn't been anything since, but it's more of a hobby and an interest.
Yeah,
and I take inspiration from the music that I listen to. I try to keep my musical taste as wide as possible.
Yes.
There's very little that I really can't stand listening to.
And what's the music of the moment that you're most enjoying?
Well, the bands that I'm enjoying the most at the moment is Fontaine's DC, a Dublin-based rock band that have come.
Say the name again.
They're called Fontaine's DC. Yeah, brilliant, absolutely fantastic band. They're on about their third or fourth album now, I think.
What's your favourite track from that? Because my podcast editor Dan is brilliant at texturing in when somebody happens to mention a piece of music. Well,
funnily enough, the track that I've been listening to most recently of theirs is called Favourite, so that'll be an easy one for Dan to remember.
Over to you, Dan. You'll know what to do. So marvelous. Okay, next bit of shaping. Sorry, this is
the next thing that inspires me is camping. I love, as I've mentioned previously, I love the outdoors and being outside, and I quite like going to campsites, pitching a tent, cooking in the outdoors, and the feeling of it being cold at night and having to snuggle down to get warm, and then feeling the fresh air kind of blowing in through the tent. That's just.
I'm thinking of a grizzled veteran with a billy can now. This is lovely, very nice.
That's it. Yes, it conjures up that kind of image, doesn't it? And then the third area of inspiration is being amongst other people. I'm actually capable of being a bit of a hermit and a bit reclusive sometimes, and I'm not great at keeping up a visiting schedule and going to see people. But when I feel really inspired is when there's a group of us together. So mostly I see my friends at gatherings and house parties and gigs, and obviously these three things come together: being with people, camping, and music at music festivals. So I'm a great festival goer, and living in Somerset, I've been going to Glastonbury since 1981. I've only missed a few in that time. It's funny because I kind of the sort of most common way that people think about festivals is that they're this kind of fake environment, sort of fantasy environment that's away from the real world where people go to escape. But when I'm there, I realize that it's the other way round, that the festival is the real environment, and it's the rest of society and this civilization that we've had built around us that is the fake part.
Yes. Oh, wow. Yes.
And
So
because,
you're in very profoundly into sort of gatherings,
Yeah.
of the clan, the gathering, which is quite primeval. Yes.
yeah, exactly. Because I think that the human species has been lighting big fires, dancing around them, playing the drums and getting shit-faced for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. So when you go and do that, it really does tap into something really primeval, and it feels like this is where we're supposed to be, and this is what we're supposed to be doing.
And the one we all want to be invited to is Beltane, which is where you get to do some shagging as well. I'm remembering my history there. There's a brilliant book called Mists of Avalon where all of that is wonderful. It's like the Arthurian legend book.
Yes. Sounds wonderful.
In fact, the gathering is I love that, because I'm all about that too, because even the clearing is a place, you know, energetically where the best questions, the best stories. I can imagine a fire very definitely at the center of the clearing, the gathering.
Yeah.
Lovely. So now we're on to squirrels. You know, what are that's borrowed from the film Up, where as I mentioned, the dog goes, oh, squirrels. So what are your shiny objects that never fail to distract you, Murray Cowell?
Yeah. So the first one is spreadsheets. Any excuse to create a spreadsheet and I'm off.
Wow.
And I can lose hours and hours doing spreadsheets. My son's even bought me a mug that says I love spreadsheets on it, and then I broke it, and they bought me another one, and I broke that one as well. So that finally they bought me a mug that I had specially made that says I love breaking my I love spreadsheets mugs, because I was going through them at such a rate.
Your sons sound awesome, and I love that. The sort of recurring rule of three. They've given you finally the mug that can keep on giving, which is lovely. Also,
I'm being very careful not to break it, because we could get into an infinite regression of I love breaking my mug.
You'll end up producing your own spreadsheet on the number of mugs that you.
Yes. They find something. I can imagine some kind of
almost completely alien to me. So this is really wonderful about where you begin, where I end, because I just don't live in a spreadsheet. I just can't do it.
Yeah, and I have to be careful, because in the past I have suffered from what I call spreadsheet millionaire syndrome, which is that if you have a business idea, if you create a spreadsheet, it's really easy to keep tweaking the numbers until it makes you a millionaire this time next year. So that's something that I think is a note of caution to other spreadsheet lovers. And they can get very involved and very technical. And actually, one of my sons is quite an accomplished chess player. He's captain of his county team. And he asked me to collaborate with him recently to help him produce a spreadsheet that would analyze his results, which openings he'd used, what kind of opponent he'd been playing, whether he was white or black, did he win or lose. And so we've had a lot of fun doing some deep analysis in a very kind of geeky, nerdy sort of way.
Great, the meeting of true minds. That's phenomenal. Yeah. The Queen's Gambit right there, but the Sun's Gambit. Love that.
Yes. Yeah.
So spreadsheets. No one has ever said their shiny object syndrome thing. Oh, squirrels is a spreadsheet.
It's a spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yes. That either makes you just fascinating or deeply dull in my mind. So your second squirrel, please.
The other distraction is irrelevant tangents, and anybody who knows me even moderately well will tell you that during a conversation I can go off at a tangent, and then I can go off at a tangent from the tangent and a tangent from that tangent, and end up quite a long way away from the original conversation. And it's because as I mentioned earlier, I listen to a lot of podcasts, I read a lot, and so I know a little bit about a lot of things, which means that, and also I think one of my skills is seeing things from unusual angles. So my irrelevant tangents are often taking the conversation in an unusual direction.
Yes.
Which can be, for me, is very seductive, and I get distracted like that very easily. For the person that I'm in conversation with, it depends on the circumstances, because sometimes people sort of enjoy the strange convolutions that the conversation takes. But if we're supposed to be doing something else, it can be really irritating for people.
No,
So,
I love that, because I am Captain Tangent too. I love that. It's a bit like the idea of throwing a pebble on a frozen pond surface, and it goes and bounces off, and the pebble ends up miles away from where you thought you'd put it. I love that.
Yeah. And so one of my catchphrases is backtrack, as I'm kind of desperately trying to think, where did we? Because I kind of become aware that we're not where we're supposed to be.
Yes.
Primarily in business conversations. And then I'm thinking, okay, so what were we talking about before that and before that and before that? Oh yeah, that's the topic of the conversation.
I love that. Backtrack. So I'm delighted. I'm doing quite a good job at keeping you to the structure here, which is great. Even though I'm enjoying any sort of tangents we do, it's because I feel secure in my own structure now, you see.
Well, okay. I love a bit of structure too. As a spreadsheet geek.
You must do, yes, as a Mr. Spreadsheet geek. Backtrack. And now a quirky or unusual fact about you that we couldn't possibly know about you, Murray, until you tell us.
Yeah, well, I discovered that this is unusual. I didn't know that this was unusual, but I own a gospel hall. So I've got a gospel hall in my garden, and it turns out that not everybody has one of those. So I think it's a quirky, unusual fact.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so the village that I live in, Colford, an evangelist in 1915 decided that he wanted to bring more godliness into the village. And so he went and bought a military hut from the military camp in Devizes and brought it here and had it erected so that he could hold gospel services here. And we've got a great photograph. It's available online somewhere, actually, of a shower bank outside of the gospel hall in the early 1900s, with one of those open top shower banks full of all of the faithful on their way to a trip to the seaside. And so it's wonderful. It's wonderful history that's associated with it. And in the 1980s, the members of the gospel community clubbed together and raised enough money to build a brick gospel hall, which is just the other side of the road. And so they sold the old gospel hall to the people who owned the house before we bought it. So when we bought the house, the gospel hall came with it. So I'm now the proud owner of a gospel hall, and I'm thinking of my own religion.
I love that. And is the acoustic phenomenal within it? Because it would require quite a good acoustic to be able to sing.
Well, no, bear in mind that it's an ex-military hut, not designed for its acoustic properties. So it's a timber frame building. The regrettable fact about it is that it's rotting away. So all the timbers have rotted away. It's covered in corrugated iron, and that's all rusted. So it's not in the best of shape. It's been standing here for over 100 years, and I always joke that it's only the echoes of a century of hallelujahs that's really holding it up.
What a great bit of storytelling that is.
When they fade away, it will collapse.
I've never met anybody who has a gospel hall in their background. I've met somebody who's got a shell grotto, but that's a proper, what's it called? If it's a quirk, if it's a totally unique building, it's called a, what's the word? I've got it. Yes, thank you. Brought to you by, it's a folly in your back garden.
Nice, yeah.
Love that. What a great, brilliant, unique, quirky or unusual fact. We've shaken your tree, Murray Cowell. Hurrah. Now we stay in
having it shaken.
Beg pardon?
I've enjoyed having it shaken.
You're very welcome. Now we're going to stay in the clearing, move away from the tree. Next, we talk about alchemy and gold. So when you're at purpose and in flow, Murray Cowell, what are you absolutely happiest doing in what you're here to reveal to the world?
Yeah, well, I'm capable of real hyper focus. I can lose hours and hours, as I mentioned with the spreadsheets. But when I'm really in flow is I love the work that I do, and I particularly like designing training programs and bringing them to life, and the creativity that's involved in that, particularly if I'm collaborating with somebody else in doing that.
Yeah.
And that's when I really feel like I'm doing the thing that I do best.
Yes.
So and it can be a really creative process where it might be quite a mundane idea that needs to be communicated, and it's thinking about how do you make that interesting, how do you make it engaging, how can we vary the structure of the training program so it's not all the same thing over and over and over again. How do we weave a narrative through the particularly for longer training programs? How do you kind of make this logical flow throughout the session. So that's something that I can easily get stuck into. And the other thing is hosting client calls, particularly because I do like one-to-one coaching as part of my program, but also group calls. Yeah. And I love both of them, but the group calls are the ones that I like the most, because there's so much synergy that happens between and amongst clients when they're all collaborating together and everybody's working on the same kind of things, and the sort of openness and vulnerability that people are willing to show, yes. which I always find incredible to be a part of. And so I really love hosting those calls and yes. facilitating those calls. And when I'm doing that, the time just absolutely whizzes past.
Yes. And indeed, that's hooked me in our rapport to date. Offline later on, I'm intrigued. I think that one of the ideas is to help me develop an idea. And because of your spreadsheet prowess, I'm sure that will be exactly the gap that I'm missing. So I know we're looking for opportunities to collaborate, but that's just given me a bit of an epiphany, which is fantastic.
Sounds great.
So now, brilliant. We're going to award you with a cake now, Murray. So do you like cake?
I love cake, yeah. And my as I mentioned, I'm quite good at cooking. My signature cake is called a caramel tres leches, and tres leches is a Mexican recipe which involves making a very light cake, like an angel cake, and then soaking it in 3 milks, which is what tres leches means. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't speak Mexican Spanish. So you soak it in a combination of evaporated milk, condensed milk, and cream. So this is a very rich cake. It's extremely calorific. And then having done that, you put another layer of cream on top of it, and the caramel is added. This is actually a Turkish variation on the Mexican recipe. You then put a layer of caramel on the top of that, and everybody who's ever eaten it is just wildly, fanatically positive about it. But
I'm frenetically positive. I'm going, no, yes. What do you con leche cake?
It's a caramel tres leches.
Tres leches. Love that. Brilliant. So that's awesome. And now you get to put a cherry on the tres leches cake. And this is stuff now, Murray, like what's a favorite inspirational quote that's always given you a sucker and pulled you towards your future?
My favorite inspirational quote is one that I've personally found very helpful, because I believe it contains a lot of truth, and it's quite lengthy as quotes go. And it's Roosevelt's "Man in the Arena" quote, which is, a lot of people may recognize it because it's very well quoted. But he said he was addressing he was in France, and this in 1910, and he made this speech. And this section of the speech, I think, is very, very relevant for all of us who are in business on our own account, because being business is very tough, and you don't have to look very far to find someone who wants to piss all over your dreams. And so what we need to counteract that is to be able to build our confidence and our belief in ourselves. And I think this quote is really helpful in that respect. And so I'm going to read it if it's okay. I've got it over here. Because it's quite long and I haven't memorized it. So what he said was, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or whether the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. What do you think of that?
How'd you like those apples? Phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great.
And I found that very inspiring, because
yes, me too.
I don't want to be a cold and timid soul.
That's really clear. And I'm just letting it hang there because that was awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, Murray?
Yeah, it's a piece of advice that really stands out to me was when I first started in L&D, and then I went on to work in HR for 11 years. I think I was working in HR. And when I first worked in HR, I didn't really understand what was going on, because everybody said things like, we've got to align the HR agenda with the business agenda. And I always found that to be quite a puzzling statement, because I used to think, well, where's this HR agenda come from? Because surely we work for the business. So shouldn't our agenda come from the business agenda? But that didn't seem to be a very popular view in HR. And I remember that there was a guy who worked at, this is when I was working at Whitbread. There was a guy who worked at Whitbread's head office called Peter Cayley. And he was a Liverpudlian. And he had a slight air of menace about him. And I noticed that the operational managers were slightly in awe of him, even though he wasn't physically a big presence, but he just had this kind of air about him. And in several meetings I was in with him, he said, "You've got to make a commercial decision." Apologies to any Liverpudlians. "You've got to make a commercial decision." He said it out the side of his mouth like that, like a gangster. I can remember saying to him after one such meeting, "What do you mean by that, Peter, when you say we've got to make a commercial decision?" And he said, "Well, we've got to think like business people." He said, the problem with people in HR is that they think, they're always thinking in terms of their values and this kind of thing. And I really recognize that, because my manager at the time used to say, "We're the conscience of the business." And I didn't really like the sound of that.
Yes.
And so him saying, "You've got to make a commercial decision," he was really saying you've got to think like a business person.
Yeah.
Even if you're in HR, you still got to think like a business person.
Yes.
And that stood me in great stead, particularly when I got into more senior HR positions and I was required to make commercial decisions.
Yes.
That the advice that I really got from Peter was, think commercially first, and then think about how the HR, what is the commercial requirement demanding of HR, and not the other way around.
Lovely. It reminds me of that story about, it's quite apocryphal, but the story of teams that were always wrestling with decisions and choices. And then this is a Coca-Cola derived story. And then eventually the person that made the decision would say, will it sell more Coke? A cola, not Coke, as in, yes. But just the idea of the binary, it's a business decision. I really like that advice.
Yeah, yeah.
We're ramping up shortly to talk about Shakespeare and how you'd most like to be remembered. But just before we do that, this is the pass the golden button moment, please. So now you've experienced this from within, Murray Cowell, the Grizzled veteran of the trading world, who would you most like to pass the golden button to, who you know will most benefit from, enjoy, or just like being given a damn good listening to in this way?
I would like to pass the golden baton to Rose Rokins, who runs an organization called Start the Conversation. And she trains people in business to talk about suicide. She's a suicide prevention trainer. And her belief, strongly held and amply demonstrated, is that anybody can talk about suicide, and that lives can be saved by equipping people with the tools to talk about suicide. So she has 10 tools for talking about suicide that she calls TAS 10, talking about suicide 10. And she is somebody who I think is on a really significant mission to get this message out to as many people as possible. And she would really benefit from a good listening to, because more people need to hear about what she's doing.
And just say her name one more time.
Rose Rokins, Rowkins.
Wonderful. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, now, is to introduce me to Rose. Thank you so much. And now, that's great, by the way, and sounds very important work. It would be my pleasure. And now, Shakespeare, inspired by all the world's stage and all the better women, really players, 7 Ages of Man speech. How, when all is said and done, would you most like to be remembered?
I'd like people to remember me as someone who always had time for other people, and didn't judge people, listened well, and did my very best to be an all-round decent human being. That really is how I think I would want people to remember me. And I think of that as a work in progress. I may not be completely there yet, but that's my aspiration, is to get to that point before I pop my clogs.
a worthy legacy, and I'm sure it's already very much in place. And obviously, may that be many, many, many thousands of years off in the distance, obviously.
Let's hope so.
And now, this is the lovely bit, which is called Show Us Your QR codes, please. So where can we find out all about you and the work of Accelerando on the old interweb? So first of all, I'm going to show you this, and you're going to complete the ... So tell us all about, please, the clientfind.club.
Yes, so that's the internet address. The URL is clientfind.club, and that QR code will take you there. The Client Find Club is a club for trainers, facilitators, coaches, and consultants. And we are all on the same, we all have the same aspiration, which is to build a steady stream of incoming business by finding more new clients. And that's the lifeblood of every business, even if you've got a good client base of repeat business. At some point, some of those clients are going to stop working with you. And so everybody needs new clients coming in. And even if you've got as much work as you can cope with, there's always the possibility of working with better clients, nicer clients, happier clients, clients that are more of a joy to work with. So the Client Find Club has been established in order to allow us to collaborate and learn from each other and to network together with the objective of finding more clients for our training, coaching, consultancy businesses, facilitation businesses. So you can come to the Client Find Club, and therein you will find a form where you can join the club and join in various free activities. There's a monthly business boost bulletin packed full of great business building ideas and various other opportunities. And there are also paid levels of membership, but it's free to join, and there is a free level. And this is a growing community of trainers and coaches and consultants and facilitators, and all are welcome.
Beautifully put. If you'd like to follow Murray on LinkedIn, here is the QR code for that. But obviously, in any case, if you're just listening and not able to see the QR code at the moment, least of all scan it, you can then just look for Murray Cowell, the grizzled veteran of the training world, on LinkedIn. As this has been your moment in the sunshine of the Good Listening To show, Murray Cowell, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, I'd just like to say thank you very much for inviting me to be a guest on the podcast. I'm a big fan of the podcast since we first met. I've listened to it and subscribed to it. I think I really love the structure. It's a very good, effective way of getting people to tell their stories, and delightfully bonkers, I think was the phrase that I used to describe it.
I love that, and thank you for saying delightfully bonkers when you did, because that I really do love that, and I bank that as being, I like being delightfully bonkers, which you're very generous, because that gives me a perfect segue into the next thing. If you'd like a conversation about being my guest too on the Good Listening To show, there are several different series strands about how you can go about doing that. This has been a brand Strand founder story episode, obviously, that you've heard Murray Cowell do very articulately, but there are a number of series strands. And the series strand that I'm particularly excited about at the moment, that I'd love to talk to you further specifically, Murray, is the Legacy Life Reflections one, which is using this structure to record the story of somebody near, dear, or close to you for posterity before it's too late. And that's my big development this year. So if you'd like to look at thegoodlisteningtoshow.com, that's where you'll find it. We're already mostly on LinkedIn. And we're broadcasting all over the place, but this is my QR code specifically to join me on LinkedIn too. Chris Grimes, Mojo coach, motivational comedian and broadcaster. That's that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've been Chris Grimes, but most importantly, this has been Murray Cowell from Accelerando, the grizzled veteran of the trading world. Anything else you'd like to say, Murray?
Just that it's been a wonderful experience to be here today.
Right back at you. I'm going to end the stream now, and thanks for listening, and goodbye.